Welcome, everybody. Hey, John, nice to see you. Thank you so much for coming out today on this glorious Block Island day. Uh, um, I want to welcome you. My name's Judy Gray. I'm a member of the Block Island Coastal Resilience Committee's Corn Neck Road Working Group. And we worked together with the rest of the committee to put today together for you. As you know, the town and the Coastal Resilience Committee have been working with the state of Rhode Island on ways to protect Corn Neck Road, in particular after Hurricane Sandy in 2012. We have a long way to go, but we want to be ready for the foreseeable future. And we're working with the town and with our community here to make Corn Neck Road and the town itself more resilient, more adaptable to storms, sea level rise, whatever else may be coming down the pike to meet us. Before I go on, I would like to introduce our speakers today. Should I do this now or at the end? I'll do it at the end. What the heck? Then we can just move right into what they're saying. So in order to make ourselves more resilient, this requires us to look at threats on both sides of Corn Neck Road, both the very dynamic beach side and the more quiescent Great Salt Pond marsh side. So how do we enhance, this is a question we're asking ourselves, how do we enhance the natural abilities of the dunes and marshes to protect the road? And one of the things that Mary Anderson says a lot is it's not just the road. The road is part of an ecosystem. And the way you describe it, Mary, that I really like is it's part of the sandwich. And we have to look at the whole sandwich. And so that's just as a context of what we're doing here today, looking at nature-based solutions versus hard structures. The nature-based solutions is consistent with the current approach by the state of Rhode Island and is part of the reason why we've been successful in gaining funds for planning. We're here today at the behest of the town council to look at the gap in the dune where the current beach pavilion is located and develop solutions that both protect Corn Neck Road and meet the needs of residents, both year-round residents and seasonal residents, as well as the general public. So to place this discussion in context, it's about protecting Corn Neck Road and maintaining ourselves as one island and trying to prevent a cut. What you'll be presented today are designs that are purely discussion facilitators. Thank you, Leon, for that word, those words, versus actual proposed designs. They're very preliminary, not anywhere near final designs. They're what I call plug and play. You could pick the roof line in design A and the ramp in design B and the bathrooms in design C, and then come up with a completely different idea for the outdoor space. I mean, it's the designs are designed to stimulate discussion. And one of our jobs as a committee, since we are advisory, is to collect your feedback both today, but continuing on. What are the needs that we need to accommodate? Another intention of these preliminary designs is to give us ideas of what's possible, to spur conversation and to give everyone a baseline from which to work. So we're all starting from the same place. The concepts do incorporate some basic constraints that we'll have to stick with no matter what. For example, offset from the roadway, reduced penetration in the dune, and elevations above flood levels. Besides these basic constraints, the rest can change and the final product will almost surely look completely different than anything you'll see today. Having conceptual designs does not imply that we have determined anything, that we've agreed to anything, or indeed that anything will actually happen. We're designing. But the fact is that the building is old and vulnerable to storms, and as has happened in the past, thank you, Martha, for your article this week, that the town is going to have to replace it at some point, that building at some point. What you're participating in today is the start of an effort to be prepared for whenever we do decide to address the issue of the dune gap and the vulnerability of Corn Neck Road. this is a way of addressing what we have all seen with our own eyes happening over the last several years. We want to get as much public input throughout this process as we can for whatever actions are proposed. In addition to the presentations today, we've issued a survey to collect your thoughts and the survey, use the QR code. I'll send out another email to the BI bulletin board. But the survey will be open until April 30th. We're going to close it then just so we can collect the data and get a baseline from the survey. I also would expect that we would reissue the survey. And as an aside, I already know one question that I want to change, and that is the residency question, because I got feedback from a lot of seasonal residents that felt like they weren't accommodated because they're not voting residents, they don't live here year round, and they're not visitors. And so I think as a person who lived in that status for most of my existence with Block Island, I probably should have been more sensitive to that. In addition to the bulletin board and this meeting, we will be distributing the survey and discussing these concepts at Earth Day on April 25th on the front lawn of the Harbor Church. And later that day, on the 25th, we will have this material available and the survey certainly available at the BIRA, Block Island Resident Association Coastal Resilience Committee meeting with Nantucket's Leah Hill. She'll be visiting us on the 25th and making a presentation at BIMI, is that correct? Okay, discussing Nantucket's resilience planning, which is very elegant and very well funded, and I'm sure that there's a lot that we could learn from them. The CRC, the Coastal Resilience Committee, will continue to seek ways to interact with the public about the pavilion. And if we are able to, we'd like to do something maybe at the pavilion this summer. We've discussed the idea of having an information hub with space for stories, photographs, and maybe a story walk. Mary, again, hearkening back to you, said to me this morning, "Our coast is surely changing, but people's memories don't." And she's right. Change is hard, it's emotional. When they removed the spinning circle from the state beach, I was heartbroken. When the long wooden piers that extended on both sides of the pavilion disappeared, I thought the beach would never be the same. I thought the sand would all disappear. But the beach evolved, I evolved, everything changed. I'd also like to say a few words about timing. Currently, there is no funding to move beyond the planning phase for the pavilion. Our intention is to create a shovel-ready plan so that if and when the pavilion is damaged, or if or when funding is made available that we actually choose to pursue, that we can go for it. Because storms and funding opportunities wait for no one, we've got to keep moving. Our current funding gets us to this point today, a little bit beyond this point today. We have received additional funding to advance the design to some point that is shovel ready. How that money will be spent is up to the town council. They'll be discussing that. The money's just starting to arrive now. So, very clear, we want to hear your thinking about the pavilion. It's your pavilion. We want to hear your voices. We want to hear your emotions, your stories, your feelings matter. All of this matters to us. So, with that, I will introduce our panel today. It's not a panel, our discussion group. And I'm going to start with Mike Gardner from GZA, who has been our prime liaison on this project. Mike.
Thank you, Judy. Okay. As Judy mentioned, my name is Mike Gardner. I work for GZA Geoenvironmental. I've been working on this project for a little over a year now. I know many of you have been thinking about it much longer, so that's one of the reasons why we're here, to get your feedback, as Judy mentioned. I'm going to cover a little bit of the historic portion of the project that we've been a part of over the past year and a half before moving into the pavilion discussion, and kind of talk through the transition of why today we're focused on the pavilion and the gap in the dunes. Um, so here are just some of the folks involved between the town, GZA, BIA Studio, who's also with us here, and Right Turn Solutions. Oh, sorry, everyone. You're just looking at my name. Is there something that I can do on here? There we go. Thank you. So Judy already covered a lot of this very elegantly, but I want to kind of talk about a recap, like I mentioned, of the project that we've been a part of up to this point. And part of that project is carrying forward some concepts that we laid out last summer and last spring. And we've brought those concepts into 60% design and permitting. And those two projects are Scotch Beach parking area and the dune paths along Corneck Road. And then we're going to just briefly talk about why we are no longer talking about at this point the parking area in front of the pavilion, and that's on hold. And we're focusing now on the pavilion and the gap in the dunes. And then we'll talk through some different siting possibilities of where a future pavilion might be located, if not in its current location. And then I'll pass off the mic to BIA, and they're going to talk through some of the nice concepts that you may have seen as you were coming in front of the doors, and what the potential pavilion might look like, and hopefully spur some feedback from you all that we'll talk about at the end and have some breakout groups where we're really looking for your feedback. So just going back to last year, we had our first public meeting specific to this project back in May. And that was a vulnerability analysis presentation where we just discussed what we saw on site, elevations, how frequent storms are, flooding levels now and in the future. And we really just walked through the different vulnerabilities and the different areas that are vulnerable along the site. So that was a public meeting we had back in May. And then we had a meeting back in beginning of August, where we talked through a number of different mitigation strategies and solutions to those vulnerable areas. And we started to lay out conceptual designs. We presented those conceptual designs for Scotch Beach, the dune paths, and for the parking area. And then based on feedback from that meeting, we moved away from the town beach parking area and to the pavilion. And we also advanced the other two concepts to 60% permitting design. And now we're at the current meeting. So Judy did discuss this, so I'll be brief, but the objective of this portion of the project, the funding that we have for Corneck Road right now, is really to increase the resiliency along the whole roadway using natural nature-based solutions and rebuilding the dune, stopping erosion, really working against those coastal hazards. And this just shows a number of key areas that we identified during the vulnerability portion. These were also identified back before we even started the project. You, as well as many others within the Block Island and who visit these places on a daily basis, highlighted these areas as being vulnerable. And that's something that we also saw during our study. So as everyone probably knows, the major vulnerabilities are coastal. That comes typically in two forms around here. That's a nor'easter or a hurricane for your big storm events, and even smaller storm events. The vulnerabilities are the same, just a little bit less intense. And the hazards include high water levels, waves, high winds, and then along with that, especially for the parking areas, precipitation. So this is all kind of a recap of the previous meetings. We went through a pretty extensive list of different strategies and solutions that could be implemented. So just covering that really briefly, we talked about a number of different natural nature-based solutions. All of these have an element of that, but we focused on some specific ones, and you can see that on the top left there, an example with reef balls, some dune restoration vegetation that kind of is self-explanatory. Through the parking areas, we worked through a number of different permeable solutions that might be able to be implemented. Access management is a big one here, especially for the dune paths. You might not have to do too much other than throw out some signage, some fencing, and then we work through some hybrid shoreline protections, green infrastructure, and the potential for elevation relocation, which is kind of the focus of the second half of this meeting today in regards to the pavilion. So going back to what we presented last year, Scotch Beach Road and parking area has a lot of flooding, as you can see in this image here, through precipitation events and during large coastal storm events, water can run up the path and then down into the parking area, and it doesn't really have anywhere to go currently. So um, this is one of the areas that we proposed this conceptual design back last year, where we would basically do some simple regrading and changing the material up a little bit and adding some vegetated stormwater management solutions to mitigate that flooding. And since then, we've advanced that concept to a 60% design drawing. This is just a snip from that drawing, which has gone to a permitting set at this point. And then the second area that we move forward are the dune pathways. There are a number of these. I'm sure you've all used them at some point to access the beach from Corneck Road. They're all vulnerable, kind of similarly as Scotch Beach Road from the coastal side, whereas um, on the landward side, they don't really have much vulnerability to precipitation. On the coastal side, they are vulnerable to wave run up and overwash that pulls sand away, and that's exacerbated by the widening of the pathway on the seaward side as people exit the path and head, north or south. Even if you're not walking on any dune grass, you can slough off some of the sediment, and it'll slowly over time widen that pathway and allow waves to come up even further. So that's one where the vulnerability might be mitigated by just some simple concepts. So here we have what we proposed last year, where we have some walkway mats, some fencing, some signage, and some vegetated areas to break up the waves from running up the path and also allow a designated path for people to walk on. And those have been advanced to 60% design. And this is some steps from those permitting drawings here. Okay, that was an overview. Hopefully none of that comes as a big surprise. If so, you can come find me after. Um, but at this point, we're really transitioning to the focus of this presentation, the discussion that we want to have later, and why we moved away from the parking area. I'm sure almost everyone here is aware that the parking area behind the pavilion at the town beach floods, and it stays flooded for a long time after storm events. So that is definitely still an issue and a concern of, I'm sure, everyone in the room, the town. But that has been put on pause because there's a bigger issue, which is the pavilion is located where the dune should be, as you can see here. It's pretty clear from this aerial, and it's clear if you're out there on any given day. Uh, so that's the path that the town and the public wanted to take. That's the feedback that we received after our meetings last year, that this is a primary concern, and it is. Um, so the major vulnerabilities with this is that because the pavilion's there, the dune can't rebuild. I mean, you can see it in the winter, it does rebuild slightly on the seaward side. It wants to rebuild, but that sediment is moved away because it needs to be in shape for the summer season. You need to have access to the pavilion. So it's really hindering that dune growth. And then because you don't have no dune there, it's very low lying. And I'm sure many of you have seen waves run up during storm events along the paths on either side, wash into the parking area, and kind of erode away the dunes on the side. So it's a vulnerability for the pavilion, it's a vulnerability for the parking area, and it's a vulnerability for Cornet Road. So some initial thoughts we had at addressing this vulnerability are resiting where the pavilion is. This is an initial take at some locations that the pavilion could go to in the future if it were reconstructed. And they're just highlighted by these squares here. So the three options that we have are by no means set in stone, but just to hopefully get everyone's um, opinions of and get you something to sink your teeth in and to really think about. So the first one we have is we're calling current area on this slide. It's basically exactly where the pavilion is right now, except for set back behind where the dune would naturally be. So that's kind of picture it sitting where the bike racks are normally. The second option we have here is kind of in the north parking area. So it's still in a position to use the current parking areas, but it's further north. It would be situated behind an existing dune system and yeah, central to that location. And then the third one is much further north. Here we just have it drawn between First Path and the parking area, but it could be really anywhere along that stretch between Scotch Beach, and it would have a similar effect. And that would be moving the pavilion and the parking areas somewhere else. So some initial advantages and disadvantages just to think about before our conversation a little bit later are for each location. I'm going to go through those now. The first one is the current area, and I've just kind of uh, cropped in some dunes here. So it looks like, where the pavilion is currently is right here, but now we filled it in with dunes. At this possible location, you're still central to your parking areas. That's an advantage. There's also these wastewater and gray water treatment facility areas north and south of the parking area. Those would be able to be to remain in place. And overall, minor site changes. The use of the site is very similar. The feel of the site is very similar. You're not redoing the parking areas. So those are all advantages to having it in the current location. Some disadvantages to that are, as we've discussed, and we all know, there would be ponding water issues in the parking areas, as is currently, unless that's mitigated, which um, is on the docket. Then another issue with this location is that the dunes are naturally less wide the further south you go along Corneck Road. Um, you'll see from another aerial, and you may just know from driving by that as you go down further south on Corneck Road, the dunes get squeezed and are a lot thinner, and then as you get north, they get wider. So, um, being at this location, there's a little bit less protection for the pavilion and for the parking areas than would be further north. And then another disadvantage to siting in this area is that the pavilion would be put in place prior to the dune being restored. So you kind of have, and in this case, we're proposing a raised pavilion due to future water levels. So you would have a pavilion that's relatively high up compared to the dune in front of it while that dune is rebuilding. So access to the beach from the pavilion might be a little bit of a challenge at that point. And then finally, you have a loss of parking during construction. Ideally, that's in the off season, but regardless, you would have a loss of parking. So moving to that second location is the north parking area, kind of maybe located in this location here. You get to use your current parking spaces. There might be some reconfiguration of ingress, egress, but overall, you get to use those spaces and you don't have to redo that. So that's a positive. Again, minimal changes in the gray water and wastewater, and minor site changes overall. Another benefit is that there's a known dune elevation. So you're setting it up for immediate protection if you put the pavilion there. You know what the dune elevations are out in front of you, what that's going to look like from the pavilion as you build it, and what access to the beach from the pavilion might look like right away. And then another advantage is that you kind of have uninhibited dune regrowth here, which is what we want to. At the end of the day, we're trying to restore the dune at this gap that is a major vulnerability. So that could be completely roped off, and the dune could regrow naturally or with some assistance like plantings and sedimentation. And then, as mentioned previously, the dunes are slightly wider at the north end of the parking lot than they are at the middle. So you do get that a little bit of benefit as well. Some of the disadvantages, again, stormwater ponding unless it's mitigated. Some rework of the parking area would be required. That's more of a cost and time thing. Again, you'd have some loss of parking during construction. And then we have the third location that we're proposing for this conversation, which is further north. So that would be moving the entire parking area in the pavilion further north. So the advantage, similar to moving it just north in the parking area, is that you have those known dune elevations, and you have that immediate protection. Um, you also have, complete unhindered dune growth back at the original parking area, because once this is constructed, you can completely abandon this, with one caveat, which I'll mention in a minute. And the dune system is much wider here, so that's protection for the future. Typically, with these sort of systems, and if sea level rise is realized to the extent projected, then your dune is going to want to shift inward towards the land, and in doing so, you'd be losing some of that protection. But in this case, you would have a little bit of a buffer for your main primary dune system to shift landward. Another benefit is that while this is all being constructed, you're not losing parking. You could keep the current site as is, and then when construction is finished, you can just switch sites and you have no loss of usage. Um, Ideally, in this situation, elevations aren't much higher, but a lot of the ponding issues in the parking area that don't come from the coastal side are due to the south parking lot sitting at a low spot along Corneck Road. And in an ideal situation, this new parking area would be sited to mitigate that as best as possible. So ideally, you'd have reduced ponding. Some disadvantages are you're changing your whole parking area, and yes, you can let this rewild for the most part, but there are utilities underneath the current parking area that would need to be accessible. So not all of it is a one for one. You would have more parking area structural along the whole length of Corneck Road. Obviously, the clearing of the habitat is not ideal. There's a nice secondary dune system to the north, and that would require flattening and grading that, and removing a lot of vegetation. And then the site use changes, where everyone parks along the roadway when there's parking overflow, and just the access of the beach and which area of the beach that you'd be in. It's minor, but there are some site use changes. And then along with that, there'd be a change in the gray water and the wastewater infrastructure. With that, I'm going to pass it off to BI Studio and Leon to present some of their concepts. Hopefully I can get this. That didn't work.
Picture that he's
Oh,
got
sorry, Judy.
Like that was before the blizzard. And you go out now, you can see the after blizzard and all that too that's gone.
I was sharing my window, not my screen.
Already gone.
Just do this transition. Work.
So my name is Leon Davis. I'm an architect with BIA Studio, and we put together these concepts for our discussion today. As Judy introduced, really the intent with all of this is to facilitate discussion, because it's one thing to say we need to reestablish the dune. It's another thing to really understand what that means in terms of now using the beach and having a functional pavilion. So this site diagram is showing the existing condition, and you can see that the existing building is squarely in the primary dune system, and then the parking lot is essentially all located within the secondary dune system. So once that primary dune is reestablished, and we're looking to now reintroduce a new beach house, the core challenge is really an elevational one. So the existing parking lot is at roughly elevation 8. So if you think of that as ground is the number 8. Based on building codes for being in this flood zone, we need to elevate the building and put the finished floor at roughly elevation 16. So we're 8 feet up above grade. So it's elevated. That does work nicely with the now reestablished primary dune, which is obviously a big mound that we have to climb over. So in putting the first floor of the new beach house with that 8-foot climb, you're able to transition over the dune and down. But it's a very different relationship to the beach, to the dune, and to the parking lot. And so to help kind of explain and work through some of the design issues related to that, we've developed these 3 different concepts. So the concepts we're showing here are essentially based off of what you have today in terms of the functions and the uses in that building. And we're looking at 3 different ways you might recreate that condition on the site with some different relationships to the dune, to the beach, and different approaches to bringing users out towards the water. So as I mentioned, we have to get up 8 feet relative to grade, and that can be a bit daunting to a user who's arriving on the site. So to make that experience as accessible as possible, one thing that we're doing kind of universally in all 3 schemes is we're using what we're calling an arrival porch, which is just a short climb up. And then from there, there's some initial program, maybe outdoor showers or the restrooms and changing. And then there's a secondary climb to go up another increment. That way you don't have to do all 100 feet of ramp in one go, so to speak. So that helps us sort of break down that journey up over the dune. And then another thing that we're doing kind of universally is we're looking at how to use outdoor space. I know the pavilion you have now is very much an indoor-outdoor feeling building. It's got,
Where's the water?
the water is here.
Okay, thank you.
So water, beach, dune.
Sorry.
So the building you have now is very indoor outdoor feeling. Parts of it don't really have roof, or they have just the corrugated translucent covering. So in each of these schemes, we're using outdoor space in different ways. Also, the character of the buildings themselves is very much open for discussion, right? The current building is a seasonal use. It's not conditioned year round. I think that's largely what we're imagining for the new structure as well. But in terms of just getting to the nuts and bolts of how these buildings could work, we've got a few ideas that we're going to put out there for discussion and feedback. The concept A is essentially what you have now in terms of indoor program, just we've sort of broken it up into smaller pieces. And then progressively going through, there's less and less indoor space. So concept C has significantly less interior space. And in that scheme, we're showing what could be food truck stalls in lieu of the existing concession stand as a way of making the building smaller. Concept B is kind of in between, where you have the restrooms that you have today, but you don't have showers and changing rooms. You just have outdoor rinse stations. So these are really meant to get reactions from you, so you can start thinking about how would you want to use a new facility, and you can kind of reimagine how you're using it today, what works, what doesn't work. So just kind of to jump into the schemes themselves, these designs are not at all intended to be proposals, but we did want to represent what it's going to feel like on the site with this new dune, and just to help you visualize what the stairs and ramps will look and feel like, what that new relationship to the beach and to the water would be. I'll quickly touch on, for those of you who don't know, what's in the building today. It's obviously restrooms and changing rooms. There's also a series of bunk rooms for lifeguards who stay in the building during the season. There's a concession stand, which I'm sure you're all very familiar with. And then there's the beach equipment rentals, first aid, and then there's a few small support spaces, storage, and a manager's office. So this option is basically reallocating all those same spaces in the same sizes, which is not a decision that's been made. That's just sort of meant to be a baseline starting point. Yeah, so we've rotated now, so the water's here, and then you can see the parking lot. So a few other constraints I'll just mention quickly. There is a 50-foot setback from the road. So each of these options has been basically oriented starting at the setback and then going waterward from there. So what we're doing is we're essentially staying in that central parking bike rack zone of the site just to help orient. And so the two cuts out to Corn Neck Road are the existing entry and exits that are there today. So in this option, what we're proposing would be more of a central courtyard outdoor space with potentially some covering. The key differentiators from a resiliency standpoint here are that we are located just behind the ridge of the dune, so to speak. So the building is still pushing into the primary dune system to some extent, but we are behind the dune, and you can see that the outdoor deck, which could have covering on it, is basically bringing you right to that line. So I think one of the fundamental questions we have is, what is the relationship that you want when you're using this pavilion, when you're arriving on the beach, to the beach and to the water? What you have today is very much a building on the beach. And so once we start moving behind the dune, that is going to change that dynamic. And so that's just kind of one of the things to think about. So in this option, that outdoor space brings you right up so you can, in theory, still see the water. But because we're pushing into the primary dune system, as Mike was mentioning, you don't have that same kind of buffer to future dune movements, and it's not as sheltered as it might be otherwise. So this view is just looking at that from the water side, just to give you a sense now of what this elevated building on the dune could look and feel like. You're going to need to have some kind of a access path down now to the beach from this elevated dune as well. So we're showing basically a standard structured ramp system that splays out. That's as much just for illustrative purposes, so you can get a sense of what that length would be. But you can see in this section here just how that sectional relationship works. So you've got the water, the beach, and then this would be that newly reestablished dune. We're not actually able to let the dune in this type of a scheme build fully to the ridge that it would naturally, and that it's formed to the north and south of the building. So we are still kind of artificially holding the dune ridge down a bit to allow for that elevation 16 finished floor. The challenge is going higher than that means more stairs, more ramps, more climbing. I mean, some more detailed solutions that I think we would have on the table further down the design process is you could design a building that could be raised incrementally in the future. But as a baseline, I think 16 is really the starting point. And then you can also just see how what we've done is we've broken up that climb into those two stages, so to speak. So concept B, the elevational moves are all the same. So we're still climbing up to that level 16, which is 8 feet above existing grade. In this option, the building is oriented 90 degrees to what we had previously. So again, the water's here. So this is much more facing the water the way the current pavilion does. And then all of the spaces are organized on the water facing side. So your concessions, your rentals, those types of spaces are all accessed essentially off of a deck that's looking out towards the water. In this orientation, the building can be set further landward, so it's more in the secondary dune zone. So you can see relative to that dune ridge, you're back now. So we've reestablished that buffer space. And in this option, the dune could continue to build and grow to the height that it naturally wants to be at. and you would just be left with smaller cuts essentially, as your access points back down to the beach itself. Um, this option is suggesting maybe there's just outdoor rinse stations and showers as a way to reduce the footprint of the building, just to help you visualize what that might look like. And then the pavilion today has a central lobby. So in this option, rather than having an indoor lobby space, there's essentially an outdoor covered lobby, so to speak, that's meant to be sort of that covered outdoor space, but not truly enclosed. So just some visualizations to help you kind of understand what that might look like and how that relationship to the dune and to the water is different in this type of an approach. So you can see how there's now kind of a bridging across, and then you would descend down. And then, yes, the intent is that everything would be designed to universal access standards. So that would be about providing ADA compliant access down to the beach itself. But also we've heard that there's a desire for people to not necessarily want to navigate the sand and just have a viewing spot. I know we've heard people like to sometimes just drive and sit in their car and look at the water. So we're thinking about those types of interactions for people as well. But ultimately that's what today's about too, is to learn from you what's important to you and how you use the site and how you would like to use the site in the future. So this third option, we've taken the smallest footprint. So we're looking at more mobile solutions with food trucks and things like that to help reduce the built area even more. In this option, the bathrooms are located at this first lower porch elevation. So they're more associated with the parking lot, so to speak, which works well from an arrival standpoint, but it does mean traveling further to get to them from the beach itself. And then in this option, the bulk of the program is oriented, again, with the water here, kind of perpendicular. And in this scheme, we're pushing out an observation deck beyond the ridge of the dune, so to speak. So this orientation allows for a narrower aperture in the dune, so to speak. It's a shorter frontage facing the dune system and the water. But it is, again, restricting the height that we can elevate to at the dune crest. What this does give you, though, then, is that covered, potentially outdoor space that's very much out into the beach environment, if that's something that's important to you. So the dune in this scheme is filling in, but it's not filling in the ridge on either side of the existing pavilion today is roughly 25. So we're talking about setting this building at 16. So where the building is at in this type of an orientation, obviously the dune is not going to reestablish to a continuous 25 all the way across. So it would fill in, but it would not fill in to the full height. And so that is sort of a relationship between the pavilion, the dune, and the beach, that there's a compromise to be made, or a decision to be made about what's your relationship. Is it fully behind and we want to let the dune build to the maximum that it wants and we'll have small connections through? Or is that universal access idea that we want a building that's still on the beach, so to speak? Or is it something in between? So these are really just meant to help you visualize those relationships and what that means. So here you can see that deck is pushing out the furthest relative to the three schemes we put together. So just in summary now, you can see how those apertures are very different, right? And then relative to that dune ridge, in one, the pavilion and that outdoor space has pushed out the most, so to speak. This is bringing you the closest to the water. In this one, we're the furthest back, so we're respecting the dune kind of to the maximum extent that we can in this option. And then concept A is sort of in between, where we're bringing an outdoor deck roughly out to the dune ridge. So as Judy mentioned in the beginning, these are very much mix and match concepts. You could say, I want a small footprint, but I want it all the way back in the parking lot. I mean, there's all those kinds of decisions are on the table. Um, and hopefully in looking at these plans and these images, it helps you visualize what some of these decisions mean, because that's really ultimately what we're trying to convey, to help enable you to make informed decisions as you think about what this might look like in the future. So I think ultimately, as we move into the breakout group session, what we're looking to hear from you is, how are you using this building now? How do you access the beach today? And then with the understanding that protecting Corn Neck Road means reestablishing this dune, which is changing your relationship to the beach, how would you like to use that in the future? And what is going to best serve your needs, so to speak? Nigel.
So, if you were to move the location to where there is already a current dune, just the north of parking lot, or further north still, much broader, the dune is already higher. How would you deal with the fact that you're putting a new building behind the dune? Would you remove the top of the dune, which I think would be a highly undesirable thing to do? Would you cut the arrow path through it, or could you actually build the building a little higher?
I think we absolutely could look at building the building higher. I agree with you. We're not going to want to go in and bulldoze an existing healthy dune system. So I think the siting discussion is very much part and parcel to the design solution discussion. If we're putting the building in the existing gap, it's going to feel odd to go to 20 feet on day one and have a level ground underneath it. But if you're going to an established dune where you want to elevate above it, I mean, I think those are going to interplay with each other. Absolutely. I mean, those are all great questions. And I'd say there also might be a phased approach. Maybe you construct it to a certain elevation, and then as the dune builds and you need a higher viewing deck or something like that in the future, I mean, I think those solutions are on the table as well.
So, can you repeat this right there, just so that the people who are on YouTube hear?
So what I'm really interested in understanding is, once, regardless of the cause, whether it's a storm or by choice, we move the building, from my perspective, you're essentially enlarging the vulnerability to the road, because the water has more space to enter towards the road. And I understand that is temporary, but it is affected by the speed of the rate at which the dunes recover over time. And I would be interested in hearing what mitigation can take place in the meantime or during that period, to accelerate the growth or regrowth of that dune.
So I know that GZA has actually been doing some analysis of the dune regrowth rate. Mike, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, this is all really preliminary concepts. You make a great point. If we were to remove the building, it might be a year before the dune is big enough to protect from what maybe some of the pavilion is protecting from right now. But there are a number of different things that we could do from this is all just conceptual level, initial, you could do sand fencing. You could place a big pile of sand there day one. You can do plantings that will trap sand much quicker over time. Those are just a few options. And you could do anything like sandbags or anything, just things, biodegradable materials that can get buried in the dune as it grows. And it will also give you that kind of more immediate protection from some smaller events.
And the CRMC cover that?
Can't speak for CRMC, but typically, yes. Yeah, they will be happy to permit natural nature-based features for the most part.
Hey, Liam, can I just say one to both you and Michael and your teams? This is terrific stuff. I mean, regardless of whether the community settles on any of these, I think it accomplishes what you said you set out to do, which is have a range of choices that create conversation. So thank you.
Thank you.
I did just want to share one more thing before we close out and go to the breakout groups.
I'll let you.
Just one more slide, bear with me here. Last slide before we go into the breakout groups is there's a public survey. We kind of had a soft launch earlier this week, so that's available. You can scan this QR code with your phone. You can go to the protectcornneck.com, and there may be another way to get there from the emails, and it should be passed around. So we'll leave this up, this QR code up, and I'm sure you'll see it around town. So please, if you don't mind, fill it out, give us your input. If you don't get to speak your mind here today and jot everything down, there's some open feedback sections in here. And also for anyone that wasn't able to make it, they did not have to be in this room today and hear anything that we said to give meaningful feedback to their experience with the pavilion and the beach and the Dune Gap. This is just kind of supplemental. So please share it with any friends or family or anyone else that uses the area in the summertime. I think that's all that we have now.
Douglas, question.
Yeah. I have one question for you, Michael. Since there's quite a big investment to make this happen here, and there was a discussion and talk that the dunes are going to move back, over time, and I know the committee's trying to do everything naturally as possible. Wouldn't it make some sense to be able to think about doing like what's in front of the beachhead, in front of the building itself, to kind of delay that in that area? Putting the rocks in or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I think anything's on the table right now. The natural nature-based features are preferred from a number of different perspectives, just from aligning with the town of New Shoreham and Block Island's scenic, natural nature-based island. And then also from a funding perspective, there's more the grant funding that we're under right now is for those natural nature-based features. But yeah, I mean, I think anything's on the table. We're really early on. You could do things like, have sort of some hardened structure that gets buried by the dune. And then if the dune is eroded, you're left with that hardened structure underneath. That's a potential option. So please, I really, really appreciate the feedback and just keep bringing any of those thoughts.
One more question back there. Is this something for the discussion group or something for the? Yes. Oh, Martha, do you want to come up to the?
Thank you for letting me in the door. I'm Martha Ball. I have lived on Block Island since 1951. I have lived down the neck. I have gone past the beach house practically every day of my life. And I have no idea why this plan is even, why we're talking about this. The time that I was growing up, the state, and I know people don't want to do the work, the state put snow fencing in front of the beach house every winter. It was a labyrinth. The parking lot was fine. The parking lot didn't start to go under until the first time I remember it coming across the road was the blizzard of 78, which was a coastal storm as well as a blizzard. And when the beach was rebuilt, the beach opened the summer. That's how we remember this. Hurricane Carol came through in the summer of 54. That was when the new beach house opened. The highest recorded winds in the state of Rhode Island are on Block Island during Hurricane Carol, not 38, 54. I've checked several sources on that because I was surprised as well. But did you look at, was this just we have to do something new and innovative and alter the world and put our stamp on it? Or did we look at, can we fix what's there? Can we stop this migration of the dunes? I mean, you've all seen the picture that I send around to everybody periodically, the aerial photograph from 1960, where the west side of the beach house and the west side of the dunes aligned. The dunes have moved in completely. That's the Green Beach House. That's my postcard that I send around to everybody. And say, could you maybe look at this and see what's happened? And why are we letting this happen? Go down there now. I just drove by. The whole parking lot's full of freaking sand. Nobody wants to clear the beach parking lot out. I was on the council. I got off the council. When I wasn't on the council, I would come to meetings and I would get up at the beginning of public comment to the point that the first warden would say, "You're not going to talk about the beach house, are you?" And I would say, "Yeah, I am." "When are you going to clean it up?" And they cleaned it up briefly. I was stunned to learn a 35-year-old building has to be replaced, that it's that old, especially when it was rehabbed, was Dave, 10 years ago? It wasn't that long ago. The beach house was rehabbed. What? 17, 10 years ago, almost. So that's my question. And not my question, my position. And I did not take the survey. I tried to take the survey, and it very clearly became apparent that the survey was written exclusively for people who go to the beach all the time. I grew up here. I live here. The beach was over the neighbor's field. We didn't go to the state beach. That wasn't part of our socioeconomic. I wasn't a summer kid. I wasn't on vacation. My family wasn't on vacation. And as I went through the survey, I kept thinking, well, I can skip this, and then you couldn't because it was other, and then you tried to fill in other. Well, that didn't work. And I just gave up. I said, this is written, this is stacked, this is written for a very specific audience. It is not written for the people of Block Island. And you have the audacity to put this thing out, our pavilion, our voices. No, it's not. Be honest. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess my job was to segue us into discussion groups, which really is to hear everyone's views and opinions, starting from do we do anything or not? And this is really, as I think we've stressed from the beginning, these are just conceptual ideas to get the thoughts going and people's ideas. So I wanted to also share a little bit about the next steps before we break into the discussion groups, but I hope, Martha, that you will attend that and share more about, if the option of doing nothing is one of the options that the community wants to consider, then what would that look like? I think all of this is being done to make us more resilient in the face of sea level rise and more frequent and intense storms, which we can prepare and prevent the worst of the what's to come, or we can do nothing and pay the price for that. So I think there is, those are options, and everyone has a say in them. In terms of the survey, we'll take that feedback, and I think we can modify it so that you're not required to answer any questions that aren't relevant to you. But certainly the idea is to get everyone's ideas. And since the design, this is going to inform any future designs that are taken to the next step, that the idea was to get people who do have experience using the facilities to give feedback. But there's more to the survey than just feedback on the facilities. So please do. We encourage everyone to take it. I'm going to try to segue unless there's something about the, we don't have much time left. So everyone, who's the survey? I mean, it's been posted on the bib already. We have the QR code. We have the flyers up around town, and we'll continue to share it. So anyone, I don't know if you want to I think when Judy sent it out, she mentioned residents, and then she followed up to clarify that it's not only for residents, but do you want to clarify that?
Yeah, and we probably, probably should talk to Renee about putting it in the newspaper and, but we're willing to entertain any way that you can think of to share it. Yeah,
So let me start by thanking GZA and BIA, which have been great partners for the town throughout this project, past year and a half. I'm Ann Salinas, for those of you who don't know me. I'm a recent addition to the island. I'm a year-round resident, but also currently the chair of the Coastal Resilience Committee. For those of you who don't know much about the CRC, just to refresh your memory, we were established in 2021 by the town, and we are an advisory committee to the town council. Our mission is to gather current scientific data and build on community knowledge to advise the town on priority actions that will improve Block Island's coastal resiliency. We do this by understanding the potential threats to the island posed by sea level rise and climate change, regularly engaging with the community to collect input and conduct outreach, which this is part of that, and evaluate and recommend opportunities for adaptation and mitigation, again, to the town. So today we are here to get your feedback. And we are going to synthesize what we hear today and what you share through the survey and present it back to the town council and the town manager as we decide how to move forward. So in terms of moving forward, Judy mentioned that there's a new grant that's been awarded. We haven't yet received the funding for that. The town hasn't received the funding, but it's $439,000 from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, which is part of a Rhode Island DEM grant that we're part of. So that grant allows us to continue the planning and design of not just, we're moving from the Scotch Beach and dune paths to further develop the beach pavilion concept, and to also look at further the southern end of Corn Neck Road, closer to town, as well as the marsh side. So, you know, given how these works, we're talking about the next 2 years probably for that grant to be implemented. So the town will have a say, town council will have a say in the scope of that grant once we get the agreement and we determine exactly what it is we want to do and contract out for that. So the CRC anticipates the town will use the new grant funding to fully develop one of the beach pavilion designs so that we have a shovel-ready design. Then we would need to get funding to actually implement it, or we don't. And we wait to, if the current structure is destroyed in a storm, then we would have a shovel-ready design that we could then get funding to build. Hopefully that won't happen. In my opinion, I hope that doesn't happen. So we're talking about a multi-year process where there's going to be lots of opportunities for the public to give their input and for the town to decide what it wants to do next. So this is really just, I wouldn't say it's a starting point because we've been studying these issues and planning around them since Superstorm Sandy. But so to segue, we are really happy with the attendance today. We were planning to break into discussion groups, and I still think we should for the remaining time we have, which is 25 minutes. So if you stay with us, we are going to break. Judy and I were going to facilitate. So we were going to have 2 discussion groups, but now I'm feeling like that's not going to be sufficient. So I'm going to, sorry to put anyone on the spot, but if any other CRC member would like to help facilitate. No, Nora said no. So if there's anyone else that could, really it's just capturing what people say and recording it on the flip charts, and yeah.
So, And we'll have a member of BIA or GZA in each of the groups taking notes so that they're also hearing
Yes.
what you're saying
And can answer questions.
and can answer questions.
Yeah. So the idea, do I have any volunteers? Sosha? Okay. So we're gonna have I think we have about 8 seats in this room, the conference room here. So small number can go into that room, and then otherwise we're gonna have one group in the back of the room and one group in the front of the room. And maybe Sosha, if you could take that room, I'll be in the back and Judy will be up front. So let's just take a few minutes and we're gonna get your feedback on both the siting and the designs. Good. Yeah. Yeah. They started up again. Yeah. Planning it divided first.